Hello, welcome to the Peaceful Wood Turner. This is a piece of spalted oak. It's shoring from a water department project nearby, and I've already taken a couple pieces off of this, as you can see, so it's down to this nice little bit of round, and I decided I want to make a cup out of this. I want to put a handle on it, so I cut off some of the same wood that I can use to make my handle. Nice big chunk of that. But before I cut the handle, since I'm not that good at making things exactly the way I want them to be, I'm going to start by just getting this down to a little bit more round. You can see it's still got a flat spot right here, and get my shape set up. That way I'll know what I'm going to do with my handle. So it's pretty close to round as it is, so it's a good opportunity for me to practice with my skew. And I'm going to be going at about 1100 RPM to start. That feels really nice. It's nice and round. I'm going to hollow the inside, finish my edge, and then I'll be able to work on sanding the outside and figure out exactly what I'm doing with my handle. I'm going to change my camera angle here so I don't put my shoulder in front of you. Okay, you reset. So I hope you can see pretty well. Let me know if you can't. I'm going to keep going at about 1100 RPM right now. That's pretty nice. Got a nice thin wall. I think it's a good depth. I'm just going to use sandpaper to round the edges up of the lip here. And at the same time I'm going to sand the inside. So before I sand it, I just put a little bit of a coat of mineral oil on it just to raise the grain. And now I'm just going to start sanding with a 220 grit. And I'm going to move up from there, go to finer grits. Luckily the skew worked really well on the outside, got me a nice smooth finish, and I actually did pretty well with my bowl gouge on the inside. So now it's time to sand it down, trim this edge up a little bit with the sandpaper, and we should be good. So I realized my speed was way too high, so I've slowed it down. Luckily this is early on in the process and shouldn't be a problem. Gonna go to a 500 grit now. I've gone through a couple of finer ones, so now it's time to go something really nice and fine. And it should take everything down to a nice smooth finish. Then I'm gonna figure out how I'm gonna cut this hunk of stuff so that it goes on here nice. There it is, turned off, ready to go. Here's my wood that I'm going to use for my handle. As you can see, this is a relatively small cup, so my handle is going to be a little tricky to get right to scale, but it's really going to be kind of a small handle too. Maybe something more like this, so you can hold it this way. A couple fingers going through, and then you hold it. I'm really not sure how to do proportions on this kind of thing. So my thought was to start with thinking about the diameter of it, thinking about the height of it. So here's my diameter. And I think if I use that as a starting point, that's a substantial handle for that. But that's pretty close. I think if I cut this out, then I should be able to make a nice size handle for this. What I'm going to do is just come in a little bit. So now my outer diameter of my handle is going to be the same as the diameter of the cup. And the inner diameter will be just slightly smaller, but that'll give me a good bit of meat to cut into. I'm going to do this cutting on my scroll saw, which creates so much vibration I can't film it. So it's roughly cut. As you can see, it's got some wiggles and wobbles to it. I'm going to start by sanding it a bit with the palm sander. Try to take out some of these high spots here, and then I can figure out exactly what my shape's going to be. So you can see I got the worst of it off. Now I need to figure out exactly how much more of this I'm cutting off so that I can attach it properly. Let me get my face shield up out of the way so I don't sound quite so funny. So I kind of like that scale. That's pretty close, but obviously it's not a right fit. And it's a little bulky in the hand, especially for how delicate this cup is. So that's kind of a hefty handle for such a little cup. So I think I'm going to need to cut this down probably pretty close to in half. And I'm going to trim off the ends a little bit, but I'm actually going to do that primarily with sandpaper and just kind of sanding against this. So let me start by cutting it. There's been a great deal of sanding. Obviously I didn't show you all of it. I didn't think it was worth the trouble for you to see every little bit of what I was doing. I used the palm sander, I used my hands, obviously. I even used a rotary tool for a little bit to just try to get everything off. So the piece is a lot smaller now than it was. I did cut some off with the scroll saw, and I sanded things down so we don't have all those high spots and ridges. I'm liking the size because I think once it gets on here, it's actually going to be pretty close to right. I'm trying to figure out where I'm putting this thin spot, if I'm putting it at the bottom or the top. And I'm kind of leaning towards actually having it at the top because it kind of feels good against the thumb. But part of me really wants to hide it. So let me know what you think. I think it's going to end up at the bottom right now. The good thing is I think this is going to become my cup to use around here. So I'll get a feel for it and I'll figure out where I went right and where I went wrong. Handles are my problem when it comes to cups. This is only the third cup I've made and only the second one that's gotten this far. So my next step is I'm going to take my 100 grit paper, I'm going to wrap it around my cup, and I'm going to use that to sand my groove so that it'll match the edge. You can see it's starting to cut it in a little bit. It's going to take a little while. That's almost perfect fit. Just going to take a little more off. That looks good. I think that's nice. Next question is exactly where is the handle going to be? I like the spalting showing. So considering that when you hold it, you're going to hold it, I'm going to hold it in my right hand, being right-handed. So right about there, I think, is where that should be. So that looks good. I'm going to glue it and clamp it, and then we'll put a final finish on it, and I'm planning on putting a food safe two-part epoxy type finish. So I'm going to use a waterproof wood glue. Put a not too generous amount on because it's going to be hard to clean off any squeeze out. I think that looks good right about there. Get a clamp on it. Without it moving too much. There. And we'll let my little Hobbit cup sit for a while. Once that glue sets up, I'll be able to put on my finish. My glue has had plenty of time to set up, so now I'm going to start putting my finish on here, and I figure it should work pretty well with this to actually just mix it right in the cup, at least for the first bit, because most of it's going to go on the inside. And this is a two-part. It's got the hardener and it's got the rosin, and I have dedicated little syringes that I use for this. Lets me measure it really nicely. Well, that time I didn't suck in much of the rosin. Sucked in a lot of air. There we go, much better. And this is the best piece of technology, my nice little mixing stick. I mostly had very decent results with this finish. I had one time that I must not have gotten my mix right because it just never got fully hard. So I've got a plate with a sticky bottom. Not a good thing. So I work a little bit more carefully to make sure that I measure really well. Now I'm going to coat a lot of stuff here, but I'm not going to coat anything that's going to be coming close to dripping down on the bottom because I don't want this to stick to anything. My next coat that I do on the outside will have a slightly different setup. This stuff takes a while to harden, and you have to kind of monitor it so it doesn't get bubbles in it. But once it's on there and it's hardened, it makes a really nice finish. It's really thick, strong. I used it on a Spalted Oak goblet that I made, and the video's on my channel, and it came out really nice. It's one of those pieces that I like too much to give away, but I never use it anyway, so I probably should give it to somebody. I know a couple of wine drinkers. looks pretty good. It shouldn't flow down to the bottom. I am going to set it on some parchment paper though, just to be sure. And I should get a nice thick coat settling into the bottom of this, giving me plenty of protection in there. Hopefully this will make a nice little teacup for me. As you can see, it's hardened up nicely. It's got a nice coating, especially on the inside where I did the heaviest coat. I did have to trim a little bit of runoff on the bottom, and I'm going to have to trim some more on the bottom after I do this next coat, because now I'm going to do more of the outside. And so I've got a can to mix it in this time. I've used a variety of containers. Really, the best thing is supposed to be a unwaxed paper cup, but I don't have any of those handy, and I had a can in the recycling container, and I said, well, that'll work. Cleaned it all up real well, and I figure it'll work for me for a while. And then when I'm done with it, it'll go right back in the recycling container, and when they melt down the steel, it'll get rid of all the excess epoxy. So, nice coat on the bottom there. And now to just work it along the handle again and the sides. It's really hard to see. I have to turn this in different ways to even be able to see some of the flaws. But there are a few little kind of sag and drip marks. So I'm just trying to work it over those. Get a smooth finish. I think probably after I do this, I'll look up best ways to buff this out. Kind of thinking that if I hit it with a high grit, like a 1500 or 2000 sandpaper, I can take a lot off. And then this is essentially almost a plastic. And there's lots of ways to polish things like that. And when I learn with this, it also means I'll be able to do some of the other projects that I have ideas about. Because, you know, once I see somebody do something, I think, well, I could try that. As long as I don't hurt myself, it's all good. So, that's looking pretty good. We'll give that another day or so to dry. We'll see what we have. Alright, everything's dried, and there's a lot of drip that I have to cut off. I'm just going to do with the utility knife. Nice and easy. This stuff cuts pretty smooth. I'm just going to have to go along afterwards and sand, but I'm going to have to do that anyway. Being that this is clear, it's creating a weird optical illusion for me that it looks like the wood is going out further just because the light's bending. And so I know I cut this straight, but now it's looking to me like I've got a heck of a lip on here. But once I cut it, I see it's just epoxy. I have to be a little more careful on the inside here because I did cut an angle. if I don't follow that angle, I'm going to end up cutting through the epoxy and into the wood. Alright, that looks pretty good. Take a little more of this heavy stuff off the bottom here. And then I'm going to start sanding. I'm going to use a high grit, not go real aggressive, and I'm going to use my palm sander. So I've got a 500 grit on my palm sander, and I put a little bit of oil on it, just a lightweight oil so that it would not gum up too quick. Alright, that's really good. I'm going to buff that with a few higher grits and a little bit of handwork, and I think we'll have a nice piece. Thank you for joining me on the Peaceful Wood Turner.